Hello and welcome to a review for topic 5 on galvanic cells or electrochemical cells. So basically, when we're talking about electrochemical cells, we're talking about two particular things that make it work really well. The first is that you need to have two different metals. These are called electrodes, and if they're not different, then we're not going to get any voltage potential difference. And what that means is we won't have any electricity flowing. So as long as you have two different metals, you're off to a good start. The other thing we need here is an electrolyte. And an electrolyte is basically a liquid or substance that allows the flow of ions from one side of the cell to the other side. So first up, we're just going to take a little look at what this would end up looking like. Now we've got our two different metals. These are our electrodes. We've got our liquid here that allows the flow of ions. This is our electrolyte. Now the one thing that makes this a little bit different is we've actually got two different electrolytes, 1 and 2, as well as a salt bridge that allows these ions to flow from one to the other. When we did this in class, we just combined them into one electrolyte, but the basic idea is still the same. So first up, we've got the production of positive zinc ions. Now, when we make a positive ion, this means that it has an abundance of protons relative to electrons. What it means is there are fewer electrons on this zinc ion than there would otherwise be if it was a neutral particle. So what's going to happen is there are going to be leftover electrons. Right here we can see 2 electrons. And with that extra production of electrons, we're going to see this move through the circuit, and that flow of the electron is going to cause what we know as current. So we've got the flow of electrons, it accumulates on the copper. There we see production of a positive ion. The electrons flow through, and then they combine on the other electrode, and it combines with some extra positive ions over here to form a new neutral one. So we've got the production of electrons and positive ions. The electrons flow through, and they bond with extra leftover positive ions on the other side. In summary, the basic way that this galvanic cell works is that ions break off the electrodes, flow through the electrolyte, and this causes a buildup of electrons on one of the electrodes, which then carry the electrical current through the rest of the cell. Now there's a few different ways we can make this stronger. One, we can actually increase the surface area of the electrodes, which would allow more of the chemical reaction to take place. This kind of thing happens in car batteries. Remember when we saw the video on the car battery, it had very, very large plates made out of lead, which then allowed more chemical reactions to take place, and this allowed it to have a much higher current than it would if it had just small electrodes like the ones we worked with in class. Another one we can do is use a more reactive electrolyte. When we did our demonstration, we tried it with very dilute sulfuric acid. We tried a little bit with distilled water. Distilled water, it wasn't very pure, so we ended up seeing some electricity flowing. But as we came across more reactive electrolytes like sulfuric acid, any acid in general, we noticed that the voltage and the current both increased. And then finally we can try different combinations of metals. So certain metals pair better than others. We use copper and zinc. You could try mixing and matching any metal really, but the key thing is that they have to be different in order for this to work. The only other things we need to really talk about in this particular unit is that a wet cell basically has an electrolyte that is liquid, and a dry cell has an electrolyte that is dry, kind of paste-like. And so an example of a wet cell would be a car battery. You have these big lead plates that are immersed in the actual acid, the battery acid, which allows the cell to produce electricity, as opposed to a AA battery, which has the electrodes connected with this kind of dry paste. And for anybody that's taken one apart, you can kind of see that inside. One last note, primary cells are basically batteries that can only be used once. The electricity stops flowing once it's used up all of an electrode, or the electrolyte becomes saturated, or the chemical reactions that need to produce electricity just come to a stop. This is different from a secondary cell. A secondary cell can be recharged by running electricity back through the circuit in reverse. So this reverses the chemical reaction and allows it to be used again later. So an example of a primary cell would be just a traditional battery, a AA battery that you put into things. A secondary cell would be the kind of battery that you find in cellular telephones or on things like car batteries. And so by reversing the chemical reactions, by putting electricity into the cell, you can recharge it so that you can use it again later. That's basically everything you need to know about topic 5. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section, and good luck on the exam.